Hi Capricorn, and welcome to your June 2024 horoscope. April and May were probably quite chaotic, not just for you, but for all of us, honestly. We had eclipse season, we had Pluto going in retrograde, we had the conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, Jupiter entering Gemini. There was really a lot happening. In contrast, June should feel a little bit easier. This is because of a couple of things. First of all, we have Mars entering the sign of Taurus. So hopefully our drive and ambition should feel a little bit more calmer and more grounded. And we also have Venus and the Sun entering the sign of Cancer towards the second part of the month. So that should also bring a little bit more of the emotional and introspective energy. We start off the month on June 2nd with Jupiter trining Pluto. So Jupiter entered Gemini at the end of May. And its first aspect in Gemini is a trine to Pluto. And I think this is such an amazing way to start off this year-long transit. This is because the trine between Pluto and Jupiter brings up this idea that oftentimes we're more afraid of our own success, or oftentimes more afraid of our own power and our own purpose than we are of failing it, than we are of never achieving it. Another story that this aspect between Jupiter and Pluto can bring up for us at the beginning of the month is the fact that sometimes we need to let things go so that new and better things can come into our life as well. So all of these things might be coming up for you at the beginning of June. And especially because Pluto is in your second house, Capricorn, you might especially be asked to let go of all of the fears you have around loving yourself. All of the fears that you have around finding your own self-confidence, being able to show up for yourself, to take care of yourself in an independent way, whether financially, whether mentally, whether emotionally. And it's only when we face these Plutonian lessons, then do we start to see the Jupiterian opportunities, which for you are in your 6th house. And if you want to get into a little bit more detail as to what Jupiter in your 6th house means for the upcoming year, then I'll leave the live I did right here. There I go into all of the zodiac signs and what they can expect for the year ahead. The next day, on June 3rd, we have Venus sextiling the North Node. And you're going to be hearing of Venus quite a bit during this June horoscope. She is whizzing straight through Gemini and right into Cancer. So she's, because of that, going to touch quite a few planets. But she starts off her voyages in June with a sextile with the North Node. The North Node is in Aries right now, so it's been asking all of us collectively to be courageous, to stand up for ourselves, to not be afraid to stand out as an individual instead of always worrying about others and how they perceive us and how they're doing, how we're impacting them. And specifically for you, Capricorn, because the Sun and Venus are sextiling the North Node from your 6th house, there might be some sort of a trigger from your routine or from your health that asks you to be courageous. It could be this idea that, something happens with your health that's maybe a little bit scary, that the North Node in Aries asks you to show up for anyways, even if you are scared. Or something happens with your routine. Perhaps all of a sudden something changes in your work and you can no longer have the daily workout that you always used to have. And as a result, this North Node is asking you to stand up in the situation, set your boundaries, say no, and really stand up for yourself, even if it feels scary. And what's beautiful about the sextile to the North Node is that just a day later, the Sun and Venus become conjunct. So even though the situation may feel scary, it may take a lot of courage to speak up. Ultimately, it's going to have good benefits. Ultimately, the consequences of it will be a routine that you love and appreciate even more, or health. Your health might feel even better than it was before this whole thing started. And we're not done talking about your sixth house just yet. We have a new moon in your sixth house. On June 6th, the sun and the moon will be in the sign of Gemini in your sixth house. And one of the things to note about this new moon is that the sun and Venus are also working their way towards a square with Saturn. And even though the square will be exact 2 days after the new moon, because it's an applying aspect, it's an aspect that's getting closer, you are still probably going to feel it during this new moon. So even though with this new moon, you might want to start something new, you might want to start a new health regime, you might want to start taking care of your health in a new way, Saturn might make that a little bit more difficult. It might make it a little bit slow to start off. And I want to encourage you not to get discouraged. I really think that with Saturn, we can still get to our final destination, but we might just have to consider going there in a different way, perhaps. The square with Saturn will be exact on June 8th and June 9th. On June 8th, Venus will square Saturn, and on June 9th, the Sun will square Saturn. And what I think is quite interesting about June 9th, so you're still going to be feeling this restriction from Saturn up until June 9th. But what's interesting about it is that also on that day, Mars enters Taurus. So there is this sort of additional energy that's telling us just slow down. Just stop what you're doing. Take a moment to rest. Take a moment to just not listen to anything, to enjoy silence, to enjoy the simple pleasures of our senses, to be here and right now, to drop what you're doing, to go in nature. So honestly, I don't see this new moon as a very actionable new moon. I would really encourage you to be kind towards yourself and to allow yourself a moment for some rest and some slowing down. As soon as Mars enters Taurus, it also squares Pluto. This is happening on June 11th, and it's honestly one of the most difficult days of the month. Both Mars and Pluto can be intense planets, and it doesn't help that they're also in an intense aspect with each other. They are squaring each other. Mars is in your 5th house and Pluto is in your 2nd house. So whatever actions you're taking around enjoying the present moment, perhaps you have recently started to enjoy dancing in your living room like no one is watching, or you've recently started painting or puzzling. These activities are in some way really triggering the self-love and self-acceptance you have for yourself. I can imagine, one of the ways that this transit might manifest is you allow yourself the moment to slow down. You allow yourself a moment to watch a film or make a puzzle. But as a result, while you're doing that, you notice that you feel anxious. You feel like you're not doing enough. You feel at the end of the day like you're worthless, that you're not worthy of love because you didn't accomplish anything. You feel anxious because you didn't earn any money that day. You didn't do anything productive that results in you getting money, you getting paid for it. So this can feel quite intense for you. So I would just recommend to be very kind and to be very gentle with yourself. So now that we've talked about the heavy hitters, let's go back to our pleasant Sun and Venus, because they still have quite a few transits left in the month. On June 16th, Venus has traveled so far through the sign of Gemini. It's actually at the final degree of Gemini. And before it's about to enter Cancer, it squares Neptune. And remember, the Sun is right behind Venus, following its tail. So just a couple of days later, on the 20th, the Sun also squares Neptune. So these 4 days between the 16th and the 20th, it might be coming apparent to you if you have any delusions surrounding your communication. It might become more apparent to you. Some piece of information might get revealed. You might become conscious all of a sudden that actually you don't communicate as clearly as you thought you did, and there is some space for improvement there. Or again, this is Neptune in your third house that Venus and the Sun are squaring. What could also happen is that you also realize that you are a bit delusional about how you are treating your neighbors and your siblings, how much you contribute to your local community. And something might happen around these 4 days that really reveals the reality to you. It takes your rose-colored glasses off and shows you what that area of your life actually really looks like. So be really open, really curious, listen, take notes during these couple of days. After they square Neptune, Venus and the Sun enter the sign of Cancer. Venus does so on June 17th and the Sun on June 21st. When they enter Cancer, Capricorn, they are entering your 7th house. So towards the second part of June, you might find yourself more oriented around your relationships. Whether you're with a partner or not, you might just find yourself more focused around others, how you influence others, how you can impact them a little bit more meaningfully. And also, you're just more influenced as to how they impact you as well. You're less concerned about yourself as your own individual. And to kick off this Cancer season, we also have a full moon in Capricorn in your first house. Again, highlighting this access of you as an individual versus you in a relationship. And full moons can be quite revealing. They can make things that were previously unclear more clear. So there might be especially the way that you sort of act when you're alone, the way that you show up as an individual when you are removed from that relationship. There might be something that happens when you do that that reveals to you maybe a certain quality that you let go of when you're in a relationship. Perhaps when you're alone, you realize you're much more happy. You laugh a lot more, but when you're with your partner, you're quite serious. That could be one thing that this full moon could reveal to you. So just be very curious, open-minded, and listen during this full moon, because there might be some insights coming around that could be really useful and really nice to take with you in your relationships. All right, we're getting close towards the end of the month. Let's wrap up the final 2 Venus transits. On June 26th, Venus squares the North and the South node. And just like earlier in the month, on June 3rd, Venus was asking you to be courageous and stand up for yourself. This time, Venus is doing the same thing, but the trigger or the origin of this courage is in a different part of your life. This time, it's not surrounding your health or your routine, but it's originating from your relationships. So there might be something happening in your relationship, perhaps a boundary gets crossed, and therefore this square to the North node is really asking you to stand in your own shoes, stand firm to set the boundary and not allow it to be crossed so easily. It might feel scary, but Aries is all about seeing the scary thing and doing it anyways. The final Venus transit for June is Venus sextile Mars. Mars is in your 5th house, Venus in your 7th. So the way we're sort of wrapping up the month is all of the amazing work that you've been doing in your relationship, standing up for yourself, taking the insights from the full moon in Capricorn and applying those to your relationship. Because of that, you're able to get more in touch with, in a way, your child self, your playful self, the part of you that is just purely focused on the here and now, that can have fun, that can experience pleasure. In a way, it's a really sweet reward. It's this idea that your partnership helps you get in touch with that childlike quality within you. So it's honestly a really, really delicious aspect for you, Capricorn. And the final transit to wrap up the month with is a really big one. It's actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest, transit of June. On June 29th, we have Saturn going retrograde. Saturn will go retrograde up until November. So that gives you quite a few months to reflect. Quite a few months to reflect on your way of communication, on the way that you've been showing up in your community and with your neighbors and with your siblings, and reflect on whether you've been putting in the work there, whether you've been patient, whether you have been making adult decisions, responsible decisions, whether you've been disciplined in that area of your life as well. Take notes, because when Saturn goes direct in November, you are able to give it a try again. So overall, Capricorn, I hope you're excited for the month of June. You have a bit of focus in your house of health and routines, and then afterwards some beautiful, yummy focus on your relationships. So that should feel hopefully like a nice little break from routine and health, and you can hopefully direct your energy towards your loved ones. Thank you so much for joining me, Capricorn. I hope you enjoyed this horoscope. And before you go, one more thing. I am doing a giveaway. When we reach 1,000 subscribers, I'm giving one of you lovely people a free reading. So if you want to make sure you have a chance to win, then make sure you subscribe. I hope to see you again soon.